My sister found out about the college fund I'd been saving for 6 years, and now my whole family says I'm selfish for refusing to give it to her son. I'm 25 mem, and for most of my adult life, I've been doing everything I can to dig myself out of the hole my parents left me in. They always talked about helping me with school, promised that once I got into college, they'd make it work somehow. But those promises never turned into money, so I started working right out of high school. Barista, delivery driver, warehouse night shifts, you name it. I worked 6 years straight, saving every dollar I could so that one day I could afford a proper education. I wasn't asking for anything fancy, just the chance to do what I'd been dreaming about since I was a kid. Get my degree, build a career, and maybe finally leave the cycle of financial chaos that defined my family. My parents have always been the kind of people who live from crisis to crisis, half the time because of bad luck, the other half because of bad decisions. My older sister Lisa, 28F, isn't much different. She had her son Oliver when she was 21 and single. Since then, she spent years bouncing between low-paying jobs, constantly complaining about how nobody ever helps her. The thing is, we've all been struggling. The only difference is that I kept my head down and worked quietly, while she vented to everyone who would listen. The fund I'd been building wasn't huge, but it was enough. Around $18,000. A mix of my savings and a scholarship I earned last year that covered part of my tuition. The scholarship took care of the school costs, so I planned to use my saved money for housing, food, and bills. For the first time in my life, I was excited about the future. I didn't tell anyone about it because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. Then, 2 weeks ago, everything exploded. It was a Saturday evening family gathering. One of those mandatory dinners my parents love hosting in their cramped living room, complete with cheap wine, loud music, and everyone pretending to like each other. Things were going fine, at least by our family's standards. I'd just told my dad I'd been accepted into a university in another city, and for once, he seemed proud. "That's great, son," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "You've really made something of yourself." But then Mom, in her infinite ability to ruin a good moment, added, "And it's amazing how you've been saving all that money, right?" What was it, 19,000? My stomach dropped. The room went quiet. Lisa's head snapped toward me like she'd just heard I'd won the lottery. "Wait, what money?" I tried to laugh it off. "It's just some savings for school." Her eyes lit up like I'd confessed to hiding gold under my mattress. "You've got 18 grand sitting around? Are you serious?" "Lisa," Mom said quickly, "your brother's been very disciplined. He's planning to use it for his studies." But Lisa was already leaning forward, smiling like she'd just come up with the world's greatest idea. "That's perfect then. You don't need all that money, right? I mean, you got a scholarship. You could move back home for a bit, save on rent, and let me use some of it for Oliver. His school fees are killing me, and you know how expensive kids are these days." I froze. I thought she was joking at first, but when I saw the look in her eyes, the sharp, entitled glare, I realized she was dead serious. "Lisa," I said slowly, "that money isn't extra. It's for my college expenses, food, housing, books. I've been saving for years." She rolled her eyes. "You're exaggerating. You'll get a student loan or something. Come on, we're family. Family helps family." And just like that, my parents chimed in. Not to defend me, but to back her up. Mom sighed. "She's right, honey. Oliver's just a kid. You're young, strong. You can always make more money later. Your sister needs help now." Dad nodded along, as if my years of sacrifice were just a spare change jar I could hand over. "It's not like you're losing anything. You'll still get your education eventually." I sat there, gripping my fork so tightly my knuckles went white. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been working 6 years for that money. 6 years of night shifts and skipped meals. Nobody helped me. Nobody offered to share anything then." Lisa crossed her arms, her tone turning sharp. "So what, you'd rather hoard money while your nephew struggles? Wow, real nice, man. Guess we know who the selfish one in the family is." That word, selfish, echoed in my head like a curse. It was the same one they'd used my entire life whenever I said no, whenever I tried to put myself first. Mom frowned. "Don't talk like that, Lisa, but he does have a point. You know, maybe you could give her just a portion. Say half? Half. Half of everything I'd worked for, handed over just to make them feel comfortable." I stood up. "No, I'm not giving anyone a cent. I earned that money, and it's mine. I'm sorry, but this is insane." The air in the room shifted instantly. My father's face went red. My mother's mouth dropped open. Lisa slammed her hand on the table. "You ungrateful little piece of..." That's when I walked out. I didn't wait for the yelling that followed. I just grabbed my jacket, ignored my mother calling after me, and left. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Half of them from my parents, half from Lisa, all calling me some variation of selfish, heartless, or a disgrace. And for the first time that night, I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I was the asshole for choosing myself over my family. Or maybe I was just finally learning what it meant to stop being everyone else's safety net. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing my sister's voice. You'd rather hoard money while your nephew struggles? The guilt she'd thrown at me was so familiar it almost worked. That was the worst part. Not her words, but how easily they fit into a lifetime of conditioning. By morning, my phone looked like a war zone. 22 missed calls, a dozen texts, and a family group chat that read like a coordinated attack. My mom wrote, "You embarrassed us last night. We raised you to care about family." My dad chimed in with, "You're young. You'll make more money. Lisa's kid only gets one chance at a future." Then Lisa sent one final gem. "Hope your conscience keeps you warm when you're eating instant noodles in your fancy dorm." I didn't respond. Not one word, but the messages kept coming for the next 3 days. The worst part? My mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I'd barely opened the door when she pushed her way in. Holding a Tupperware of leftover soup like that made it a normal visit. "Honey, you can't be serious," she said. "Your sister's really struggling. Oliver's school fees, new shoes, groceries. It's never ending. You could help, just for a little while." I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms. "Mom, I told you. That money isn't extra. It's my college fund," she sighed, like I was a child refusing to share toys. "You always were stubborn. Lisa has a family to support. You only have yourself." "I worked for that money," I said quietly. "Every dollar. And we worked for you," she snapped back. "We gave you everything." I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. They hadn't paid a cent toward my tuition. I'd been on my own since high school. But in my family, everything meant food on the table and a roof that didn't always leak. Gratitude was expected even when the math didn't add up. "Mom," I said carefully, "I'm not asking anyone for help. I just want to use what I've earned. That's not selfish." She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "You sound just like your father's cousin. Remember him? He moved away and never helped anyone. Died alone." That was her way of saying, "Help us, or you'll end up unloved." I didn't even argue. I just opened the door and waited for her to walk out. When she finally did, she muttered, "You'll regret this when you're older." Maybe. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet certainty. Then, because the universe loves irony, Lisa decided to go public. 2 days later, I woke up to a Facebook post from her that said, "Some people in our family would rather watch a child suffer than part with a few bucks. Sad how greed changes people. Guess some brothers just don't understand what it means to love." It had a picture of her son looking sad, holding a backpack. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Old relatives I hadn't spoken to in years chiming in with, "Disgraceful. That's not how we were raised, and I hope he learns humility." It took every ounce of self-control not to reply, but I didn't. Instead, I sent her a message that said, "Delete it now." Her reply came instantly. "Truth hurts, huh?" That was the moment something broke in me. I wasn't angry, I was done. I blocked her number, unfriended half the family, and turned off my notifications. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Oliver, her kid. He's 8. Sweet, quiet, loves drawing dinosaurs. None of this was his fault. When he called me Uncle Ben at Christmas, it made me feel like maybe there was hope for my family. And now, he'd probably grow up hearing that I was the greedy uncle who didn't care about him. The guilt crept in again, slow and corrosive. For the next week, I kept replaying the same argument in my head. Maybe if I'd just given her some money, this wouldn't have blown up. Maybe keeping peace was worth more than pride. Then, one evening, I got a call from my dad. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. He didn't yell this time. His voice was quiet, almost tired. "Son, I just wanted to tell you that you're tearing this family apart. Your sister's been crying for days. Your mother can't sleep. Is a pile of cash really worth all this?" I took a deep breath. "Dad, it's not about the money. It's about the principle. I worked hard for something, and now everyone thinks they're entitled to it. That's not fair." He sighed heavily. "Fairness doesn't put food on the table." There it was. The family motto, wrapped neatly in shame. When we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at my laptop. I thought about the nights I'd spent in freezing warehouses, about the weekends I'd skipped outings because I couldn't afford to lose a shift. None of them had ever offered help. Not once. And now they wanted me to give it all away in the name of family? That night, I made a decision. If choosing myself meant losing them, then maybe I was ready to let go. Because for once in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for wanting something better. The silence that followed was almost eerie. For the first time in my life, days went by without my family's constant noise. No guilt-tripping calls, no passive-aggressive messages. It should have felt peaceful, but instead it felt like standing on the edge of something I couldn't see. I'd always been the responsible one, the fixer, the guy who showed up when the car broke down or when rent was short. Without that role, who was I? I tried to focus on preparing for my move, researching the new city, checking housing options, sorting out my paperwork for university. But my thoughts kept circling back to them. I'd catch myself wondering what they were saying about me, whether Lisa was still posting her pity parades online, or if my mom had found new ways to justify their anger. It was like a phantom itch I couldn't scratch. Years of family obligation ingrained so deep it didn't fade just because I said no once. A week later, I got my answer. It started with a text from my cousin Sam. "Hey man, just checking. Is it true you're cutting your parents off completely?" I blinked. Cutting them off? Before I could reply, another message came. "Everyone's saying you kicked your mom out when she came to talk to you." And that's when I realized Lisa hadn't stopped. She'd just shifted the story. Now, apparently, I was the cold-hearted son who turned his back on his family after getting some money and thinking he's too good for us. Sam meant well, but every message he sent felt like a little knife twist. Reminders of how easily one person's lies could rewrite an entire family's perception. I told him the truth, but I could tell he didn't quite believe me. He just said, "You know how your sister gets? Maybe you should just make peace before it gets worse." Make peace. That phrase had always meant one thing in my family: give in. That night, I went to my parents' house. Not to argue, not even to defend myself, just to see if there was anything left worth salvaging. When I walked in, the air felt heavy, like walking into a storm that hadn't broken yet. My mom was in the kitchen washing dishes. My dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. Lisa was there too, because of course she was. She looked up and smirked. "Well, look who finally decided to show up. Did your conscience kick in?" "Lisa," I said quietly, "we need to talk." "About what?" "Your selfishness?" I ignored the bait. "You've been spreading lies about me online and to the family. You know that's not fair." She crossed her arms. "What's not fair is watching my kids suffer while you sit on 18 grand pretending to be a victim." My dad spoke up before I could respond. "Your sister's right, son. You could have handled this better." I turned to him. "Handled what? Setting boundaries?" He frowned. "You've always been dramatic. Nobody's asking for everything. Just help a little." I let out a hollow laugh. "You're asking me to give up my future for hers, again. You've been doing that since we were kids." That landed. Mom turned from the sink, glaring. "Don't talk like that in my house." I met her gaze. "Then stop treating me like the family ATM." The room went quiet. For a moment I thought maybe that they'd understand, that something would click. But then Lisa scoffed. "Unbelievable. You really think you're better than us, huh?" I shook my head. "No. I just want a chance to build something different. Something stable. I can't do that if I'm constantly paying for everyone else's mistakes." My mom slammed the dishcloth on the counter. "We're your family. That means something." "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking a little. "It's supposed to mean love, support, not obligation." No one said anything after that. I could feel the distance between us, years of resentment and unspoken expectations stretching into something too wide to cross. I stood there for a few seconds longer, waiting for someone to stop me. No one did. When I walked out of that house, I didn't look back. That night, I transferred my entire savings into a new bank account, one my family didn't know about. I deleted Facebook, blocked Lisa's number again, and muted the family group chat for good measure. For the first time in years, I wasn't reachable. The next morning, I woke up expecting to feel guilty. Instead, I felt lighter. The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt like breathing for the first time. I didn't tell anyone, but I applied for student housing that same day. A small studio apartment near campus, barely big enough for a bed, desk, and a coffee maker. But it was mine, paid with money I'd earned, protected by boundaries I'd finally built. Sometimes, when I catch myself wondering if I went too far, I think about something my scholarship mentor told me once. Family is supposed to help you grow, not keep you from growing, and I finally get it. Because maybe I didn't abandon my family after all. Maybe I just stopped letting them abandon me. 2 months passed before I heard from them again. In that time, I'd started my first semester and moved into my little studio apartment. Barely 20 square meters, but it felt like a palace compared to the emotional cage I'd lived in before. I furnished it secondhand, with mismatched chairs and a desk I found online, and it still felt more like home than the house I grew up in. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet. No phone calls demanding favors, no guilt for not sending money, no drama bleeding into every part of my day. I worked part-time at a small cafe near campus, spent nights studying, and slowly, I started to remember who I was outside of being the good son. Then one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. It was my mother. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. The same voice she used when she wanted something. "We haven't heard from you in a while." I sat on the edge of my bed, careful. "Yeah, I've been busy with school." There was a pause. "Your sister's been having a hard time," she said, almost rehearsed. "The rent went up again and, well, she's been struggling to buy school supplies for your nephew. You know how expensive kids are." I closed my eyes. "There it is," she continued. "I was thinking maybe you could help a little, just until she gets back on her feet. You know? Family helps family." The words hit like a déjà vu, the same guilt-tripping mantra they'd used to drain me for years. But this time, I wasn't the same person. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm helping myself right now. That's something I've never been able to do before." "You've always been so selfish," she snapped, dropping the soft tone. "You've changed." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." I hung up before she could say more. My hands were shaking, but not from guilt, from adrenaline. The kind that comes when you realize you've broken a lifelong pattern and survived it. After that call, I blocked their numbers again, for good this time. I knew they'd twist it into another story about how I'd abandoned the family, but I was done defending myself. Let them talk. I didn't owe them explanations anymore. A few weeks later, I ran into my cousin Sam again at a coffee shop. He looked awkward, holding his drink like it was a shield. "Hey man," he said. "I just wanted to say, I get it now." I raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" "Lisa asked me for money last month. Said it was for the kids' school, but when I stopped by their place later, she'd bought a new TV. He sighed. "She's been telling people you're heartless, but honestly, I think she's just mad you stopped being her backup plan." I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that someone finally saw through it. Sadness because it took them getting burned to realize it. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That sounds like her." He hesitated. "Your mom's not doing great with all this either. She misses you." I looked down at my coffee. I missed the idea of her. The version that didn't guilt me for wanting something for myself. Sam nodded slowly. "Fair." We talked a little longer, about classes, work, small stuff, and when I left I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. Like a book I'd finally closed after reading the same painful chapter for too long. That night, as I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. I wasn't craving validation, or secretly hoping they'd suddenly become the family I always wanted. I just wanted peace. And maybe that was the real victory. Not revenge, not proving them wrong, but finally realizing I didn't need to fight for a place in a family that never truly saw me. I opened my laptop, checking my savings account balance, smaller now but stable. Enough for rent, food, and a little left over each month. Enough to feel secure. Enough to know that everything I had, I'd built myself. For once, I smiled without feeling guilty. They could keep their drama, their expectations, their endless definition of what family should mean. I'd already built my own version, one that started with me. The funny thing about moving on is that sometimes karma moves right alongside you, slowly, quietly, but always on time. It was around mid-semester when I heard what happened. A mutual acquaintance texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, did you hear about your sister?" I hesitated before replying, but curiosity got the better of me. Apparently Lisa had lost her job. Not because of bad luck or some corporate layoff, but because she'd been caught borrowing money from the company's petty cash fund. Nothing major at first, just small amounts that added up. When HR confronted her, she blamed a coworker. That lie didn't last long. My first reaction wasn't joy. It was pity. Then, if I'm being honest, a flicker of satisfaction. Not because she suffered, but because the universe had finally shown her what it felt like to live with consequences. For once, she couldn't guilt or manipulate her way out. Mom called me 2 days later. I didn't answer. The voicemail was almost poetic, a mixture of accusation and desperation. "She's your sister," she cried. "How can you stand by and watch her fall apart? You have money, you could help." I didn't delete the message right away. I listened to it a few times, not out of cruelty, but as a reminder. This was the same woman who told me I was selfish for wanting an education. The same family that shamed me for protecting my own future. And now, here they were, asking for help from the son they'd cast out as heartless. I didn't reply. Not a word. Silence was my final answer. Weeks later, I saw Lisa in town. I almost didn't recognize her at first. Hair unkempt, dark circles under her eyes, dragging her son by the hand. The little boy waved at me when he saw me. Instinctively, I smiled back and waved too. He didn't deserve any of this. Lisa froze when she noticed me. Her expression flickered between guilt and bitterness. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to ask for money. But I just nodded once and kept walking. That was the closure I didn't know I needed. I'd spent years thinking revenge had to look like justice. Dramatic, loud, undeniable. But standing there, walking past the person who'd once taken everything from me, realizing she no longer had power over my peace, that was revenge, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. Life got better after that. I got a scholarship extension, moved into a slightly bigger apartment, and started tutoring freshmen in art and design. It felt poetic, helping others build something for themselves, just like I'd done. Sometimes, on nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about my family, not out of longing, but reflection. They taught me everything about what love shouldn't feel like. Conditional, transactional, manipulative. And in a twisted way, I was grateful for that lesson. It made me stronger, sharper, freer. The last time I heard about Lisa, she'd moved back in with my parents after being evicted. My mom still calls me sometimes from different numbers, leaving voicemails filled with passive-aggressive guilt trips. I don't answer. I don't even get angry anymore. I've learned that some people never change, but you can. You can walk away. You can start over. You can build a life that's yours and refuse to let them take a piece of it ever again. Now every time I look at my savings, small but hard-earned, I don't see money. I see proof. Proof that I made it despite them. Proof that you don't need to set everything on fire to get revenge. Sometimes the sweetest kind is simply living well, quietly, steadily, and without them. So no, I wasn't wrong for keeping my college fund. I wasn't selfish. I was surviving. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.